Okay, so today we are going to be talking about marketing strategies that are working for financial advisors right now, which is critical because I am guessing, as many of you know, you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money pursuing marketing initiatives that result in little to no business. So we're going to talk about what works today. But before we get to the content itself, I do want to remind everybody that this is session 3 of the Building a Better Advisory Business. If you want to find out topics for future shows and add them to your calendar, you can go to horsesmouth.com/series to do that. And if you did miss any of the previous sessions 1 and 2, you can go to horsesmouth.com/betterbiz, that's BIZ, to watch those replays. And without further ado, I will hand things over to Sean Bailey, Horse's Mouth Editor-in-Chief, and Deborah Taylor, the founder and principal of the Taylor Financial Group. Over to you.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to session number 3 on Building a Better Business. I'm here with the great Debbie Taylor, who's going to be putting on her new normal practice management workshop in July. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. But in today's segment, we're going to be talking about marketing challenges. And I want the audience to go ahead and start thinking to themselves about, what are the kinds of marketing activities that you've done during the pandemic, how they worked out, how well they didn't work out. But Debbie, let's just jump in from your, you've been out here as work with Horse's Mouth now for, 15 years as a practice management expert, whilst also running your business and growing it year over year. What, from your perspective, having been both in the business and still in the business, but then also, held up as an example, like we're doing here. When you interact with other advisors, what are some of the common mistakes you're finding that they make with their marketing? What comes to mind when I ask you that?
The first thing that I think of is they don't dedicate enough time or resources to marketing. They just think, hey, I'll build it and they'll come. But the truth of it is, if people don't know you exist, if people don't know about your niche or how great your services are, then they're not going to come to you, because there's so much noise, there's so much competition, that you have got to really dedicate yourself to getting your message out there.
Yeah. But drilling down a little bit more, for instance, it's been my experience over the last 20 years that there is, because referrals is the number one source of business, new business, there tends to be an over-reliance on referrals. And therefore, people, it seems to me, are very intermittent about embracing more traditional marketing, whatever that may be. You have any thoughts or observations about that?
Yeah. So, I've seen plenty of data on this, and referrals are not always the number one source of marketing. So for a lot of people out there, a source of referrals, a source of new business. So for a lot of people out there, they're not getting their new business through referrals. Even if they'd like that to happen, they're not. So they've got to be creative. They've got to be assertive. They've got to get out there and spend money on this and dedicate resources to it. And for the people that referrals are the number one source, good for you. I wanted to be in that position. It's very difficult to get into that position, whether referrals are from clients or centers of influence. But I would tell you, you still can't get complacent. You don't know what's going to happen to those clients, those centers of influence. They retire, they move on, whatever. And so this is something you've got to constantly be in the game with. You've got to be proactive, have a marketing plan, track your results. I have somebody who literally almost their full-time job is dedicated towards marketing in my firm. Now, I know some firms aren't big enough to have that, but it has always been a critical function, whether it was one function of somebody's job or now literally it's basically a full-time job here for one person.
Well, the problem, I guess, with referrals is that it can't be as consistent or predictable.
Yes, it's
as
not in
a
your
good
control.
marketing
That's
program.
what, yeah, you can't go soft on this. It's not in your control. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, to me, I guess the other thing is, what are your thoughts on, people cheaping out? For lack of a better word, people cheaping out on what actually is a very critical aspect of their business, meaning they're not always willing to spend money on marketing, even though when you get down to the nitty gritty and you look at return on investment, if you know what you're doing and you're doing it right, it's a good investment.
Yeah. I mean, when I said before, like, you've got to dedicate time and resources, that was my polite way of saying you've got to spend money. And a lot of folks in this business are cheap. They don't want to spend the money on professional development, on learning, on growing their business. And that's a huge mistake, because if you're not growing your business, then if you look at your net new assets are shrinking, because your clients are taking out those RMDs every year, which are 4 to 6% a year roughly. You got clients dying, and every once in a while you actually do get fired. And so when you factor in all that money going out the door, what I tell my team is you've got to drive 60 miles an hour to go 30 miles an hour. And a big part of allowing you to do that is the marketing. And so you should focus on spending anywhere from 3 to 5% of your revenue every year on marketing. It really should be the bogey. And that could be in a bunch of different strategies, but you got to spend.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I was going. And the question is, all right, people should make the commitment to spend the 3 to 5% on marketing, and then I think people say, okay, I'm all right with that, but then they don't do the planning, and then the year goes by, and maybe they spent 1.5%, and it was intermittent, and it therefore is lacking. Doesn't have legs. A good marketing program has to have legs. It's got to keep rolling along, because it is a long-term approach. I think that's the problem. People are thinking short-term. I want to spend X to bring in, Y, whether it's leads or new business, whatever the case may be. But they're not accounting for the long tail of marketing. And, for instance, we've been doing the Social Security workshops for advisors, for like 5 years now. And I know a number of times we hear at the workshops, when we start talking about this stuff, about people coming in the door to talk to the advisor about Social Security, and they have material in their workshop the advisor presented 2 or 3 years prior. Yeah. And so, people are curious, and they want to learn this stuff. And I think that some advisors aren't realizing that this is a long game. Can you talk about how you're thinking about marketing has changed over the years from when you were starting out? And we know you didn't know anything about marketing. You were a lawyer and a CPA and starting out as an advisor. How has what were your big epiphanies over the years in terms of marketing? And I know you're still having them every day, but.
I am actually, but two things before we hop into that. I want to comment on the long tail, because I think that is a brilliant point. And so just last week, I received a phone call from somebody out of the blue. And basically what happened is somebody mentioned, hey, I listened to Debbie's monthly webinars. So just sort of see how we're connecting the dots. Some guy, not a client, not anyone I've even engaged in. Okay. I see him on the list attending my monthly webinars. Okay. He's talking to a friend of his. The friend says, hey, I'm looking for somebody good. The friend's actually with Morgan Stanley. The guy says, oh, I listened to this woman, Debbie Taylor's webinars. You might check her out. He goes to my website, listens to a radio show that I'd done a year ago, calls me, and now he's going to become a client, $2 to $3 million. So think about the long tail, and think about how serpentine that long tail is. Some guy that's not even a prospect, I haven't even engaged in, he's listening to my monthly webinars, tells a friend, and now the friend listens to a radio podcast. So if I wasn't doing the monthly webinars, yeah, if I wasn't doing monthly webinars, if I didn't do that radio podcast, this $3 million guy would never have become a client. And you say, oh, like that's just one example. But to your point, Sean, I was doing workshops in the libraries before we went into lockdown. And like you're saying, I have people show up now from workshops from 3 or 4 years ago. And they're like, hey, I saw your workshop 3 or 4 years ago. I don't even remember what you talked about. Say, oh, what did I talk about? I don't even remember what you talked about. But now I'm ready. My father died. I'm divorced. I'm retired. Now I'm ready. And so, part of it is just being out there and just dripping. And it's amazing when you're just like planting the seeds, how that crop might not come this year, but it comes next year or the year after. But that's part of that dedication and the discipline is 3 to 5% a year of your spending goes to marketing. That's just a line item. That's just what you're doing. And then you'll see over time it coming back. So I want to reinforce that 100% big believer in that. If you're looking for that ROI to come back in 30 days, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to, I mean, it could, lucky for you, but don't count on that and then give up. All right. So back to the question, which I forgot now because I wanted to talk about the
Well, yeah, I'm going to ask you about how your thoughts have evolved, but I did just want to touch on one more thing about the long tail, because a friend of ours, Jeff Young, is an advisor out in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he tells the story of he was an evangelist for Social Security and doing speeches. Really, he doesn't do slides or anything. He's a former, world champion Toastmaster. So he just loves to just speak from his notes. But he does, give some handouts for people, and he invites them to come in when they're ready for the Social Security analysis. And he had a woman come in the door. It was 3 years after she had heard his speech. Now she was retiring. She was an Arizona state employee. And she said, I heard what you said. Were you going to offer me the Social Security analysis? And, yes. And then, okay. And I've just, retired last week. And I'm rolling over $500,000 with you. And by the way, I want to open a couple 529s for my grandkids. Fantastic business, right? Then Jeff says, 2 weeks later, that woman's best friend at work, her partner, she also retired. Yeah. She came in with $500,000 and wanted to open the 529s for her grandkids too. So, I mean, the long tail and also the rippling, it is there is a sort of physics or metaphysics to you're doing these activities out into the universe, and then the action comes back to you. Sometimes it comes back right away. People sign up for that appointment. Within a few days, they've had a meeting with you, and hopefully that turns into business, and that's fantastic. And that is part of measuring your return on investment. But the tail is long, and to get the full measure of it, can take years. And there's a guy, Joe Latour, in Springfield, Illinois, who built his business very successfully since 2008, doing Social Security and Medicare workshops. He is on billboards. He is on radio and TV, and then he uses direct mail to drive people to his workshops. And he says, look, if you're on radio or TV, he says, I've heard from advisors from time to time. They said, yeah, I tried radio, I tried TV, it didn't work for me. And he says, oh, well, how long were you on for? And the advisor will say, oh, 3 months or 6 months. And Joe's like, no, if you're making a commitment to these kinds of things, you got to think in terms of years, not in terms of months. And the benefit for him is that because he's been on radio for 10 years, because people have seen him up on a billboard in his town, and he's also on TV, then when he starts dropping targeted direct mail to the pre-retirees to get them to come to his Saturday morning coffee, donuts, and Social Security workshop, these people who are getting his invitations in the direct mail, they actually know him. They don't really know him, but they have heard him on radio. They've heard him on TV. They've seen the billboard. And so then the invitation comes and they actually recognize him. He's not some Johnny-come-lately who's just started doing this sort of thing last week. And so he gets really, really excellent return on investment. So Debbie, my question was, what sort of epiphanies did you have as you transitioned into the business, a trained lawyer and a trained CPA, but not somebody trained in marketing? So what sort of epiphanies or what's been the evolution of your understanding of the importance of marketing?
Yeah. So I remembered the question then. Right. So early on, it was nothing, right? I mean, I wasn't doing any marketing. Particularly coming from a professional background, it was considered unseemly or beneath you to advertise or market. And actually the ethics codes for CPAs and attorneys forbade that, traditionally. And there's a lot of restrictions even around how attorneys can advertise and things like that. So that's where I was coming from. Okay. And then, my business is not growing as quickly as I wanted to. And so my marketing started off, early on, very clumsy. This is before digital stuff and social media, right? And I would just advertise in the local newspaper, literally just like take out an ad and advertise. And for some people that might be effective. For me, it didn't really work so much, but I think part of what you have to think about with your marketing is it's not any one thing that brings people in, right? It's just sort of a combination, a synergy, sort of like what Sean was just talking about with the other gentleman, is you can't just do one thing and say, this is it. This is my marketing. This is my home run. And again, maybe that works for you, right? Maybe you do some webinars and you get thousands of clients and you're like, hey, this was brilliant. But more often than not, it's dripping, it's synergistic, the effect, and that's sort of how you have to look at it. And so I would do some ads, and really that was it. And so a lot of this has evolved over time, and I say I'll try anything once. And so basically, I'm out there, and I think I've tried everything just about at least once. And then you sort of settle on the things that work for your demographic. So some of my epiphanies is you've got to spend money, okay? I have, like I said, one person who is pretty much like solely dedicated to marketing. And I don't call it marketing, I call it communications, because I do think marketing has a little bit of a dirty word. So I call it my communications assistant. And her responsibility is educating clients, educating prospects. And I take that sort of term very broadly, right? So that's our newsletters, that's our webinars, all that stuff. So I would tell you then the epiphanies is you've got to spend money on it and commit yourself. You've got to dedicate somebody in your office who's passionate about it. And then I'll tell you the third thing, and sort of this is to Sean's point, what gets measured gets done. It cannot be sort of this sideshow thing that you get to every once in a while. It's got to be a priority right up there with reviewing investment returns or whatever the priorities are in your firm. So we create a marketing plan at the end of the year for the next year, and then we measure that plan, what we're working on, literally every week. We go back and we measure it and we review it. So that's the other thing, is it's just got to be right up there. What gets measured gets done.
Right. By the way, when I was talking about Joe Latour out in Springfield, Illinois, what Joe had is a classic example, something that you would be taught in your marketing class if you were in an MBA program. And it's something called integrated marketing, okay? Because there's channels. People listen to radio. Some people only listen to radio. Some people only listen to TV. Some people are just looking at what's in the local newspaper or what's in their mail. And the point is that Joe, as he's building his brand, consistently showing up in all those channels over time, so that then when he does finally drop, $6,000 on a, 7,500 piece or 10,000 piece mailer for a series of workshops, his results are juiced. His results are good because people have seen him elsewhere. So for the folks who are out there listening right now, we're curious to know whether you've struggled with any of the challenges that we've mentioned so far. Go ahead and enter them into the chat box there. And Doug, you can let us know when we might want to turn to that.
Yep. Well, we do have some questions that have come in. Yeah, we do have some.
Oh, sure, let's go with them.
So Nicole shared that when the pandemic hit, this past year, she tried virtual events, a happy hour, mixology, trivia, and she says that these became less attended as people grew tired of virtual meetings.
Yeah. So,
I want to say one thing about that, because we saw that last spring. And at some level, I think it's true about people getting tired of virtual meetings. But I also think that what we were observing was it finally got to be warm and it was summertime and people just were less interested, period. And it wasn't the virtual aspect of it as much as it's just like, hey, I don't want to sit in front of the computer again tonight. It's still sunny out at 8:00 in the evening. And I'd rather, be out and about. So I do think that played some role. But Debbie, go ahead, because I know you had some pretty darn good success last year with virtual events, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, killed it with the virtual events last year. But I think, I think her point is more that folks don't want to do those virtual events anymore. And I think, we're going to evolve just in general to a hybrid world where some people really like not leaving their living room. And I do think after the last year or so, there's some people who are a little bit introverted that feel very comfortable not leaving. The Wall Street Journal had an article last week about, okay, now it's time for you to go out with friends again. Like, how are you going to do that? Talking about some of the social, psychological issues, because some people are just like, hey, I'm good here. This worked out really, really well for me, not having to leave my house, getting my groceries delivered and stuff. I mean, that's the truth. And so I do think we're going to evolve to a hybrid world where some people are going to continue to be very happy with virtual meetings, virtual social hours, virtual conferences, what have you.
Yeah.
And so I think the name of the game going forward is being flexible.
Sure.
There was a time 2 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever, where if you tried to do something virtually or on a phone call, whatever the thing was, that would have been considered short shrift. Like, you're not giving the person the proper attention. So we were all the way at one extreme. Okay. Then we went to the other extreme because we had no choice, and 100% was virtual. And I think now we're in this middle ground where we've got to meet people where it's most comfortable for them. And so you're seeing then hybrid approaches. So even here at the office, we're offering now in-person meetings or virtual meetings. And I'm going to tell you, I think a lot of clients are still going to choose virtual. They like the fact that they were able to sit there and look at their computer screen and not have to take 45 minutes to drive here and 45 minutes to drive back and all that other stuff. And you're seeing the conferences. I think they're going to continue to be hybrid. There is a conference this week that my RIA held, and they had a virtual component and an in-person component. Guess what? I didn't go, because I looked at the agenda. I said, this is not worth my time to fly out, all the stops, whatever. So anyway, and my team then was able to participate because it was virtual. If I went out there, my team couldn't have sat in on some of these sessions. Yeah. So anyway, I think the name of the game is being flexible, flexible going forward. Having said that, what we're doing, for what it's worth, is during lockdown, we did the wine tastings. And I think we were one of the first out there doing the wine tastings. And we wrote a couple articles on that for Horse's Mouth. We killed it. Even around the holidays, and we did a champagne tasting. And we sent out a $75 bottle of rosé champagne by Louis Roederer, the same folks that make Cristal, and very nicely received. Okay, so we did that. We also did monthly webinars. So in the past, I would do workshops in local libraries. What was interesting about that is prospects would come, but my clients wouldn't, because my clients don't all live around here, right? Then we went to the webinars. We were doing them monthly. As soon as we went into lockdown, it was very clear to me what I needed to do. So we did monthly webinars. As soon as we went into lockdown, then that was a mix of prospects and clients. So it was interesting because my clients got to benefit, where in the past they really didn't take advantage of it. And we played around with that in a lot of ways. Some of them were mixed prospects and webinars. Some of them were separate, some for prospects, some for just clients. And again, that's a whole other thing that we could get into. I talk about that type of thing in the workshop and what the strategies are. And now we're to quarterly webinars that are virtual. And maybe sort of to the point of the person who wrote in, is I found that the attendance was dropping on the monthly webinars. And so we said, okay, our attendance is dropping. Let's do quarterly webinars, but we're doing weekly office hours, which of course are virtual. So we're doing weekly office hours and the quarterly webinars, which, again, are virtual. And so I don't think I'm ever going to go back to those workshops, those in-person workshops. Or if I do, it's going to be very, very infrequently, because it's so limiting. And that's the other thing to think about, is even though now we can all go out and be in person, it's limiting. If I do a workshop at the local Franklin Lakes Library, I'm going to get 20 or 25 people. They're all going to be local. If I do a virtual webinar, it is open to the whole country. And I had people from Abu Dhabi sitting in on my webinars who are friends of a friend. And I want to continue to have that level of openness.
Right. Good.
And access.
Yeah. I'm sure also, you like that oil money.
Yeah. Just as an aside also, because I do think people have gotten a little bit tired of some of the virtual stuff. So this summer, we're doing golf clinics and mini golf outings. And so we're holding golf clinics every other week for our quote beginner golfers. And then for the golfers who feel comfortable going out there, then we're doing Wednesday tee times with my husband or myself for folks that want to actually go out and golf. But the clinics are being very nicely received as well. And so we're doing that for summer. It's outdoors. People stay within their comfort zone, helps the beginners to the advanced. But in the fall, we are planning to go back in with events for the fall is what we're doing. Yeah.
So, I mean, those client experiences are, I think, I was just looking at a new book that came across my desk the other day, and it's basically about happiness and money. And I guess a lot of research that's been done where they're ultimately identifying that, people get a lot more satisfaction out of experiences than they do out of, concrete things like their Tesla or whatever. I mean, they like their Tesla for the first month or so, and then 6 months later, their relative happiness level might not have moved. But if they'd taken the family to a 3-week safari in Tanzania, the happiness levels are higher and stay higher. So there's a whole point about experiences, which advisors, I think, have been pretty good, some over the years, of creating these client experiences. But the other piece I just want to mention is positioning yourself as a financial educator in terms of your marketing approach, where you're out there teaching the public, educating the public about, any variety of topics relating to personal finances and family issues, financial planning issues, really does seem to work. And the question is going to be, in the future, what is your mix of virtual versus in person? I don't think the in-person is going away at all, but the hybrid approach, clearly something going on. Doug, what other questions do we have out there?
Yeah, so we do have a few more that have come in. So Bruce on YouTube has asked, so what do you do about getting the word out about doing webinars?
Yeah, so we have basically multimedia strategy. So our Salesforce contact distribution list is about 1,000 names that we've accumulated over years and years of doing workshops and other folks. And so we obviously then send out constant contact, advertising the webinars. Then it's also in our weekly newsletter, advertising the webinars. It's on our client agendas. And then we do Facebook ads that we boost. And we also post on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I would tell you, those are the key ways.
I think the importance that we've seen over the last year on this front, to answer the question, is the importance of having a good email list, growing your email list, because sitting inside your email list are future clients and there's revenue there. And so, again, if you're going from not really having paid attention to building your email list to then starting to do events, well, we're going to say you need to leverage that email list, which means if Devin Kropp was on right now, who teaches advisors in our master member program about Facebook advertising, she would say, look, you need to have a regular presence on Facebook and a low but consistent budget of money being spent to engage your target audience on Facebook with paid advertising, inviting them to download something or register for something before you ever even invite them in to come to a webinar. The point is that you need to be out there and engaging these people, and you have to spend some money to do it because your goal is to build your email list. And then when people are on the email list, then it's going to be easier for you to be inviting them to these other events down the road. So that's something. What else, Doug?
Yeah,
what other questions?
So Lauren's question, it kind of jives what you just were talking about. What do you think would be more beneficial, Facebook ads, Google ads, or LinkedIn ads?
Which is more beneficial? Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, listen, Google and Facebook are very, very good, and Facebook particularly, I think, has an amazing back end that allows you to really drill down and know in quite a lot of depth who your target audience is and how to reach them. So basically, in the Facebook advertising machine, Facebook is loading in all of the data that typical direct mail companies have and sell about your target audience. So Facebook has all of that. They pay and they have all of that in their machine. And then they layer on top of that, and so does Google. Then they layer on top of that the kinds of things that you have done, or the data that they have in terms of activities of liking and commenting and subscribing to different Facebook groups that further build the profile, right? That's data that's not available to the direct mail people. So Facebook has, and Google both have people's activities within their platform with the cookies that track people elsewhere. They have the data about other websites that you go to. And then Facebook has that third level, the household consumer data that every direct marketer and every catalog purveyor has access to as well. And so that's what makes Facebook so hugely powerful. So I tend to be slightly biased toward Facebook at this point in time, but I think Google is a little more complicated, but is also powerful. LinkedIn, I don't have an opinion on LinkedIn. Debbie, have you guys done LinkedIn advertising yet?
No, and I'm with you. We're partial to Facebook. We do the Facebook ads, we boost them. That's a big priority when we're trying to advertise the workshops.
I have heard of advisors, I'm interested in interviewing some advisors who have put money into LinkedIn. I've heard some things where people say, well, it kind of just depends, like, what it is that you're going for there. But I do think that Microsoft is putting resources. They've been putting a lot of resources into LinkedIn. They're trying to make it the sort of business Facebook, and if the look and feel, the display of it looks a lot like Facebook now. So I think it has potential as well. What other questions we have, Doug?
Yeah. So Bruce also asked, how do you get your likes that you get on Facebook to actually sign up? He says, I'm spending the money as I hired a marketing company.
Okay, Debbie, I know you have hired a marketing company on Facebook and spent money and learned some lessons. I don't recall. I kind of recall at certain times you were kind of like you weren't so sure. So I don't even know the answer to this question. But Debbie, what is your take on the Facebook spend in terms of working with outside consultants and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, this is really hard. Like these last few questions about like social media and digital campaigns, because as Sean was alluding to before, there's a little bit of a black box thing going on there. And by the way, they change it, right?
Yes,
they change their algorithms. And so you think you have a strategy, and then like 6 or 9 months later, your experts come back, or you're reading an article and they're like, oh, by the way, they changed their algorithms, and they don't really disclose. There's not a lot of transparency there. So it's a really tough space to be in, is what I would tell you.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sean's right. We have hired different marketing consultants over the years. A lot of them cost $1,500 to $2,000 a month, so they're not cheap. We've hired them more to help us with the SEO, to get our name to the top of those sort of organic Google searches.
Yeah.
And this is where, again, very black box, very hard. So they would come back and say, okay, we need to revamp your website. You need to have all these certain like keywords throughout your website. So like one of the things they wanted us doing, and here's where it gets very tricky, because some of it can become almost like counterintuitive. They said, okay, you want to be at the top of an SEO for somebody looking for a financial advisor near Franklin Lakes, right? Because this is sort of traditionally how we'd all think, right? And so someone type, financial advisor, and they happen to be in Franklin Lakes, you want to be number one on that search, right? I don't need to be number one on the search for an Omaha, Nebraska, right? And they would say, okay, to get to the top of that search, you need to have the local towns all over your website listed. So every time you post a blog, every time you do something, you should say serving Franklin Lakes, Wyckoff, Oakland, which are like these local towns. And by mentioning those towns over and over again, you will get to the top of these search results. But then mentioning those towns makes us look very parochial. And part of what we're trying to do is have this sort of broader presence, not be limited, particularly post-COVID, where, I can ably serve clients in California, right? Just as I can to someone in New Jersey. And then you look like this local yokel, basically like, oh, we serve clients in Franklin Lakes. And so anyway, it's very, very tricky. It's expensive and very difficult to measure the results. So I would sit there and look at the end of every month to say, okay, did our search results go up? Did we move higher when somebody Googles financial advisor Franklin Lakes, blah, blah, blah. Very difficult to assess the ROI. And they will double talk you on all this stuff. And you don't know. It's like going to a dentist. You never know whether you have a good dentist or not. You don't know. So I've had several of these consultants over the years, all of them costing between $1,000 and $2,000 a month. They typically make you sign up for minimum contracts of 6 months, 9 months, or a year. So, it's a $20,000 spend or something like that. And very, very difficult to assess. And they'll say also, this is something that takes time, right? You can't just expect after a couple months that this is going to work. And so that's one of those fishy things.
Yeah, right.
For us, I think part of the marketing strategies is you do need to prioritize and decide where you're going to put your dollars. And so we were reviewing just yesterday in our marketing meeting, because we have marketing meetings, okay, whether we wanted to hire a consultant again to help us in these areas. And because we're getting so much business from other areas, we said, no, we don't need to focus on this because we're doing well in these other areas. And so that's also, I think, part of it is where you want to allocate your resources to get that ROI.
Yeah, and by the way, I did check financial advisor, Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. You are the top result after the paid results, right? So you got Edelman showing up and Zoe Finance or something like that, but you are the top organic result about halfway down the page, which I think is fine though. But also in the defense of local yokels, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being the local person who is the the preeminent financial advisor in your area. So let's not.
Yeah. And I apologize. I don't mean to like poo-poo that. You're right. Again, that's what I was saying though. You have to know what your priorities are and what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're saying, look, I want to be the number one advisor in my area, and if I can have that sort of ranking, that's going to be great for my business. That's going to be all I need. Then maybe you hire one of these SEO guys and pay your $1,500 a month and inch up. Because before we hired these guys, we were coming in like 7th or 9th. And we're coming behind like Morgan Stanley that's not even located in Franklin Lakes. They're like 10 miles away. And so I'd look at this to my team and I'd say, how is this Morgan Stanley office higher than us? They're not even in Franklin Lakes, And so obviously there's some work here that's done and we've had some improvement. So part of it though is deciding where you want to put your money, what your objective is, whether it's focusing on referrals from your COIs, then fine. If that's your objective, if that's what's bringing the business in, make sure you're taking your COIs out to lunch every week, right? Make sure you're doing continuing education seminars for them or their clients, right? So that's going to be your efforts. For me, unfortunately, and it's sort of an irony because I'm an attorney and a CPA, so you'd think having COIs would be right up my alley because I can speak the language, I have a ton of credibility. Unfortunately, I have one CPA that refers a lot of business to me, and that's it. That's it. And so it's actually been a real thorn in my side because you'd think of everybody, I should be getting a ton of business that way. And so I don't put a lot of effort in. They'll say, oh, go to your local CPAs around tax time, offer to do webinars for their clients. I'm not putting my resources into that. So you have to decide, what fits your niche, your personality, your skill set, and where you want to put those resources.
Well, I've noticed a lot of CPAs in your area walking around with bandages on their heads and arms and slings. I mean, you do go after the CPAs pretty regularly in terms of the terrible job. I should say the accountants you go after for really not delivering tax planning when people think they're getting tax planning. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Doug, what else?
Let's see here. So Taylor, first he had two-parter. So first part was, are you implementing a social digital strategy? So you already covered that. But the second part, how are you coordinating your webinars, podcasts, and blogs with digital paid ads?
Yeah, so I think we sort of referred to that before, is we have an entire schedule and a checklist for every month when we do the webinars. And now we just went quarterly now, but we have a whole checklist. And we then are posting, 7 days to the webinar, 5 days to the webinar, 1 day to the webinar, 4 hours to the webinar. And then we're also we're boosting those posts. And so it's all in a checklist and it's all sort of very coordinated and laid out. So I don't even get involved. They're basically on autopilot now.
Yeah. But the coordination that she's speaking to there, I think is important. If you're going to go to the trouble of posting to your blog on your website, then you do want to go over to Facebook and boost that post. Spend a little money and put that post in front of your target audience who aren't your clients. Because otherwise, who's seeing your blog post other than your clients when you include a link to it in your newsletter? So
Yeah,
I think
100%.
coordinating. I think she raises a very good question there about coordinating things.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say that we're not coordinating. We absolutely are coordinating, and we are boosting. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Any others, Doug?
Yeah, just an anonymous comment from somebody on LinkedIn. Marketing is one of the essential tools for any type of business. At least it gives you an insight of what your target market thinks of your product or service you render as a company.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And that's why I think, for advisors, again, to lead with education. I mean, that's why we put on the Financial Educator Marketing Workshop. Then we converted it into the Financial Educator Webinar Coaching Group. But the point is that the go-to strategy that Debbie and others, have deployed for some time now, especially after the referrals run out, is to put yourself out there in your community as the educator and go-to person on the key topics that would be of interest to your target audience, presumably pre-retirees, right?
Yeah, so let me mention a few sort of checklists, right? To the extent that we have folks on the call, ask yourself, are you doing these things, right? So off of Sean's point, you want to position yourself as the subject matter expert, right? So towards that end, are you doing webinars? Whether they're in person or virtual or some combination, right? Are you doing webinars? We are doing office hours for our clients. So are you making yourself available to your clients? By the way, the office hours we're making also for prospects too. So are you making yourself available, whether through webinars, office hours, some combination? Then the written form of media, right? Because again, this is sort of this all interactive, integrated, right? So we do a weekly newsletter called The Week Ahead is what we call it. You don't necessarily need to do a weekly newsletter, but are you doing a monthly? Are you doing a quarterly, right? So how are you reaching out to your clients? By the way, that goes to our prospects also. And your clients can forward your newsletter to their friends and to their family, which they do. Then we also do a monthly planning letter called Client Connections that focuses just on planning concepts. And then we also send out announcements to our clients on sort of big like Biden tax plan or whatever. So how are you sort of getting the word out there, communicating in the written way with your clients? Then some other things. We do videos. Okay, so are you doing videos for your clients or prospects? Now, in the old days, the video, you'd have to have a professional like Doug, this whole setup, a green screen. The nice thing about COVID is all that stuff went out the window, right? So I was doing videos. I mean, I actually one video where I was waking up in bed showing a day in the life, and I was literally in bed with my hair all whatever, my cat walking around. Okay, so the nice thing about COVID is you don't need a professional videographer to come to your place, right? You can just set up your iPad and start doing video. It doesn't have to be long. In fact, 2 to 2.5 minutes is probably the ideal time for those videos. And so we're doing weekly market videos. We call them weekly market updates. So we're doing videos. We also do videos in the emails that we send to new prospects or leads or people that show interest in our firm. Is we have, oh, welcome to Taylor Financial Group, or thank you for your interest. And then we'll have the thumbprint or thumbnail, whatever, and it'll be a little 1 or 2 minute video of me saying, hey, thanks for your interest. I'm Debbie Taylor. Here's what you can expect from us, blah, blah, blah. And so how are you using videos, whether it's on the website, with leads, with prospects, with new clients when they come on board, weekly market updates, what have you. So videos, podcasts. Okay, maybe you don't have a face for camera. Then are you doing podcasts, right? Super simple to do. So how are you doing that? When are you doing that? And then some other things above and beyond. The radio show, right? So I did a radio show. Okay, interesting. I just got finished doing white glove virtual webinars. So are you maybe then hiring a professional company to come in to help boost your attendance, boost the word, right? Maybe it's too much for you or your team to try to do that on your own. So how are you doing that? So I'm just throwing out some ideas. And do you have a marketing plan, right? So forget about all the scattershot stuff. Let's get back to the foundation. Where's your marketing plan, and how are you holding you and your team accountable? If you have that marketing plan.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to mention there is that trying to be as efficient as possible in what you're doing. When you're thinking about yourself as a financial educator, you are going about doing some activities that in essence are what was popularly referred to in the last decade as content marketing. And so if you put on a webinar and you record it Okay. So you've done a live event for the people who are there. Now you have a recording, and you can send out you can put the recording on your website. You can put it in an email, right? But you also can take the recording of that webinar and have a transcript pulled of all your comments, and somebody on your team can clean it up and edit it into a white paper on that topic that is then put on Facebook or some other place where people can go ahead and sign up and download it, right? Likewise, you can pull just the audio and it becomes a podcast.
Yeah.
So you're looking for doing one activity, but then seeing how many other different ways you can turn it on its side or change its form so that you're getting the maximum leverage out of your time, and putting it into different channels, whether it be the white paper or an audio or a recording, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, we call it repurposing it. And you're right. Like, we take the one thing and then we keep repurposing it. So the radio show, we get the recording, we get through compliance, then we use it as a podcast. Sometimes we break it up into little bits that are more subject matter oriented. Same thing. Absolutely.
So you mentioned office hours, and we're not going to get in because I know you've just started that. So I don't want to get into it too much until you've had a good run, and so we can talk more deeply about it. But nonetheless, if you were to do office hours for a period of time, then once a year, you could go back and pull the transcripts from your office hours, and it can turn into, 75 financial planning questions answered by Debbie Taylor, where obviously you remove, people's specific details and all that sort of stuff. But in essence, it is or it even could be split into, 5 separate types of things that you drop during the course of the year. 15 questions on IRAs and taxes, 15 questions on, estate planning, 15 questions on whatever the topic may be. And you also can take those sorts of things and leverage them back into your newsletter. Hopefully you're doing at least monthly. But if you're doing weekly or frankly, it's perfectly fine to come out with additional email newsletters outside of your normal schedule to say every now and then, hey, this is something special. I want to go out to the list. And maybe it's just a link to the recording and a picture of you putting on something, but there's a lot of different things you can do there. The other point I wanted to mention regarding this topic of webinars and people getting a little tired of the virtual stuff, so on and so forth. We have been developing at Horses now something that we're calling action webinars that only take 20 to 30 minutes. And they're typically built around a lot of these information products, checklists and things. The first one we created last year was something that we promote in the last 4 months of the year. It's called the Last Chance Financial Planning Checklist. And this is a checklist that we have you put in front of clients to have them answer to themselves certain questions about things that may have transpired in the last 10 or 12 months that the advisor ought to know about, because there may be some other things that need to be done to your plan or your portfolio that are responsive to some of these answers to these questions that the advisor doesn't know one way or the other what the answer is. And so the action webinar is simply sending your clients this checklist and then inviting them to come on the webinar. And then you spend 15 minutes kind of just stepping them through the questions and asking them to answer yes or no. And you explain the importance of some of the questions you're asking. And at the end, everybody has completed their checklist and they're directed to, send the results into you or schedule a meeting if any of the particular things that you've responded to affirmatively indicate, hey, I think we should have a conversation about that because I didn't tell you about the $500,000 inheritance I got over the summer, or whatever the case may be. So office hours and action webinars, other kinds of ways I think that people can, things that people can put into their marketing plan so that they are, bringing new leads, because it is about getting new leads. What else, Doug? I know we're running out of time here, and we wanted to finish
Nicole actually did just ask Debbie if she can explain how her office hours work, and she says, I'm assuming this is outside of appointments that are scheduled.
Yeah, go ahead and give a quick overview of it, Debbie.
Yeah, so real quick, we go from 4:15 to 5 o'clock on Mondays, or when office hours are scheduled. And we advertise it the way we're advertising everything else. The webinars have a whole lead into it, put in the newsletter, put it out there on Facebook, all those things. And basically I start with some prepared comments. So the first 10 minutes or so are prepared. And to Sean's point, we are recording it and then reposting it. Okay. So the idea here really is anytime you open your mouth, anytime you write, think about all the different ways that can get out to clients, prospects, and leads, right? And we actually have a checklist that every time we do something, we say, where can this be posted? And we have like the 10 places we could post it. Where could this go? Who can this be sent to? And it's literally now a checklist, because we'd be like, oh, should we post it on the website? Oh, should we and now we actually have a checklist. And so anyway, 10 or 15 minutes of prepared comments, no slides or anything like that. And then I open it up to questions, and we pretty much finish in 30 or 40 minutes.
Well, good. So any other questions, Doug?
No, that's it for questions right now. Thanks for the questions, everybody, and comments. Great stuff.
And just to remind everybody, Debbie is, this is a series of live streams. We've been experimenting with bringing our content to you, right? Because you're watching right now. You're not watching on Horse's Mouth. You're watching either on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube. And this is yet another marketing strategy that other advisors can adopt as well. And that is taking your content and your event to other locations in the virtual world. So anyway, Debbie's going to be putting on her practice management workshop July 19th to the 21st. She's put this on several times in the past. Advisors really love it because it gets into the nitty-gritty tactical stuff much deeper than anything we've discussed here today. You get a lot of fantastic resources as well. And anybody who's looking to get a shot of adrenaline into your marketing program with tons of highly tactical, action-oriented ideas and plans, this is the workshop for you. Come in July and start overhauling your marketing later this summer, so that you can finish strong in 2021 and be really up and flying full bore into 2022. I'm actually saying the word 2022.
So it's July 19th to the 22nd.
21st.
Yeah, July 19th to the 21st. So it's Monday through Thursday.
Oh, actually it is 19, 20, 21, 22. It's 22. Yeah, July 22.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So July 19th to the 22nd, Monday through Thursday, 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's very collaborative. It's a lot of fun. It's not just my ideas. It's ideas from the group and a lot of sharing. And it's a great workshop. We get great reviews. We get into practice management, marketing, messaging, the technology that you want to use, how to run your team, all that stuff, how to pull clients in, all that. So I'd love it if you joined us.
And just to remind people, if you go to horsesmouth.com/series, you'll see other events. This live stream is part of a series that we're doing building up to the workshop. And so you'll see the other dates and times that we're going to be here live as well. So you may want to go ahead and take a look at that. Otherwise, if you just want to jump in and take a look at what Debbie's offering for her new normal practice management workshop, you can go to horsesmouth.com/new normal, one word, and you'll see everything you need to know there. Doug, any other questions or comments at this point?
Yeah, actually, just real quickly. So Nicole said, this was great. Thank you all for the great information. And Andy said that Debbie's practice management workshop is a must. I attended the one in February. It was awesome.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Nicole, listen to Andy. We want to see you at that workshop. All right, everybody. Well, I think we'll just wrap it up. Thanks so much for being with us. It's been a lot of fun. And like I said, go to horsesmouth.com/series to see and put future events into your calendar. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.